The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick, your host from Firearm Mentor. Last week we discussed caring for parents and family members who have memory issues. And in this episode, we're going to continue that conversation. Before we begin, I'd like to share a definition of a word in Hebrew. And that word in Hebrew is mitzvah. A mitzvah is a good deed. So if you hear me say, oh, this is a mitzvah, then you know it's a good deed. You're helping someone else. The greatest mitzvah is one where the person cannot say thank you or pay you back. Now, I know life is not transactional. I learned that from my brother-in-law. However, when someone does a favor for you, it's always nice to reciprocate in the way that you can. So caring for a family member or close friend is probably one of the most important roles you will have. Forget about the career accomplishments. Caring for our elderly is very, very high on the list of mitzvahs and good deeds. And there's a ton of resources out there. Now, we heard from Janice Means and we heard from Randy Welter last week. So if you're interested, you can always go back and listen to that episode and some of the stories that they had. And this episode today, we're going to be talking about some of the solutions to the problems, particularly when we're talking about keeping the elderly safe and healthy. The hardest part in this process is to start the conversation. It's very difficult to bring it up to someone. I think I mentioned in a past episode, my mother had a memory issue, although temporary, following a brain surgery. And there were times where she was disoriented and argumentative because she didn't want to hear it. We can eliminate a lot of the fear and uncertainty if you start the conversation. And there's different ways to do that. First of all, you can look for or make an opening. You can say to your elderly relative, hey, I'm starting to think about estate planning. Do you have any advice? And that might lead into a conversation about their care. Or I just read an article about gathering all your important papers, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this episode. Sometime, can you show me where yours are? Now, my wife and I have a traveling file cabinet, or traveling file box, I should say, with all of our important papers in it, including wills, powers of attorney, passports, all that good stuff. Another way to make an opening is to say, as time goes on, do you think you'll want to stay in the house? Might be difficult with all these stairs. Or you mentioned your eyes are bothering you. Is this causing problems with reading or driving? And the whole idea is don't anticipate what they're going to say, because they might say something that you don't expect, and you don't want to plant a seed and give them an idea of how to respond. For example, you don't want to stay in the house, do you? Which is a way to control the situation, and you don't want to do that in this case. You want to ask open-ended questions. Before you do this, you're going to have to figure out in your family who is the best person to start the conversation, probably to discuss your own feelings and thoughts with other family members on the situation, and think about what the aging person's goals are and what your goals are as a family. Is your goal to get rid of the elderly person? I would say that's not a mitzvah. I mean, transfer them to someone who will care for them. Now, that might be the only case because there might be skilled nursing, as we'll find out in the second half of the episode when we talk to Eric Klein of Care Patrol. But there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of there's a lot of things that you can do to start the conversation. And one of the things you're going to want to do after you've encountered that is to review finances, and you might get resistance. The person might say, I just don't want to talk about it. Some people are private by nature. I know if I say something negative or bad, or to my wife, hey, honey, we got to do the wills, or we have to update the wills, she'll say to me, and this is a cultural thing, she'll say poo, 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 like that's going to put the bad luck off of us. So if the first conversation doesn't go well, you can try again. You can start small, discussing just one aspect and build upon it. One of the important things that you are going to want to do is to form a team. When my father was in hospice, the team was my mother, my sister, and myself, and I believe his last week or two of life, we actually had an overnight aide help him in and out of bed to go to the bathroom and that type of thing. But your team does not need to live nearby. There are a lot of remote adult children who can help. And I'll give you an example. Somebody who doesn't live near their parent, they can organize a meal train where they can set up a calendar, especially if they're technical, in, say, Google Calendar, and create Monday, I'm going to send a gift card for dinner. Tuesday, someone else is going to make something and bring it over to mom. Thursday, mom's going to order her own dinner. Friday is pizza night. Tuesday's taco night. I'm making things up as I go along, but there's a schedule that a non-local team member or non-local family member can do. Also, they can organize bill paying. A lot of times when people with memory care issues age, they may forget to pay a bill, mortgage, electricity. And you can have someone who's not local handle that process for them. They just need access to the bank accounts and a copy of the bills. Sometimes it's very hard to ask for help, but this might be one of those times where you do ask for help. Also, we're going to want to find support, not only for the elderly member of the family, but for ourselves. There's a variety of support services available to people age 60 and over and their caregivers throughout the U.S. and your local area agency on aging, or perhaps Eric Klein can help you. I know that there's a website for an elder care locator called www.eldercare.gov. And this will give you some local resources. It's also important to consult a professional. Look, I don't know how to navigate. I am not an expert to navigating the senior living lifestyle. I don't know. As I age, maybe I'll get a little bit more knowledge on it. But at 50 years old, I have no idea, at least on an emotional level. I can know intellectually how difficult things are, but without experiencing them, I just don't know. So you would want to consult a professional. If your employer has an employee assistance program, that they can help you connect to professionals and services in your community. And you can also find it through the Elder Care Locator, which is eldercare.gov. That's the website. Next, just like I mentioned, we had an overnight aide. You can hire help. However, be very, very cautious on hiring help. It's one thing if, hey, your neighbor comes over, you know your neighbor, or there's a cousin or somebody who you know. But when you're inviting a stranger into your home, it can be difficult. You're going to have to ask questions on what is the depth of the background check that the agency has employed. Are you hiring a person, an individual that you saw on Craigslist? Ooh, that might be not the best idea. I had a client and her mom had a caregiver for their stepfather, and ultimately he passed away, unfortunately, from brain bleed. But there was some heirloomy type jewelry that was missing, and part of that was there wasn't a background check. I don't know what happened with the case, but we don't want to have any abuse. And I don't necessarily mean sexual abuse, although that does happen. I mean physical abuse, emotional abuse, and taking advantage of somebody financially. The main goal is to keep your loved one as independent as possible. Caring for yourself is very, very important. If you need counseling, if you need anti-anxiety medication, if you just need to get away, do it. Do what works for you. We talked to Randy Welter last week, and she got her frustrations out by weeding the garden and stomping around the neighborhood. For her, high pressure, physical pressure is calming. And there's a technique with autistic people that high pressure is calming to them. And I know Temple Grandin, she was an autistic person who got a PhD. She came up with an invention that was actually for cows. The cows would go in and they would be in some device that would put some pressure on their sides when they were being milked or they were being moved, and it would calm them. And Temple Grandin realized, wow, this works for people who are autism spectrum. And she redesigned it for human beings, and it was very, very successful. But the point is, care for yourself. Do what makes you happy. Does going on a walk make you happy? Do it. Does exercise make you happy? Doesn't make me happy. But but do it. If it just is going for a walk in the woods, you like nature, you want to do a bonfire in your backyard in your fire pit, and that relaxes you. Or you're like my wife and you watch Lifetime Movie Channel. I make several jokes there that are not appropriate for the radio, but that's how she relaxes. She does that and she drinks coffee. That is her relaxation. My relaxation is a little different. I like to be alone. I like to be alone with my thoughts. I like to sit around a bonfire. I love to swim. One of my favorite things in swimming is going underwater, holding my breath, obviously, because I can't breathe underwater, but going underwater and hearing nothing. I love silence. That's me. That's how I get calm. Another technique where I get calm is I'll take a nap. If I'm all wound up and I'm done emotionally, I'll go and I'll lay down, and that usually refreshes my emotional well-being. So find what works for you. People who are advocates for you and for the elderly are going to have a very good understanding on the financial impact of your family. There are insurance products out there. Long-term care insurance is one of them. And a great resource is actually AARP. Now, I turned 50 this year, so did my wife. And there was some deal, it's $12 to join AARP, and I figured, we're going to get more money back on discounts. So I not only applied for a membership for me, but I applied for a membership for her, and she didn't like it too much. She says, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't want to get old. There's discounts, there's other things that are available, and there's care guides, and I'll go through one of the care guides in a little bit. Before we get to the care guides, the AARP also provides resources for family. For example, the Alzheimer's Association. Their website is www.A as in Adam, L as in Lincoln, Z as in Zebra.org. Their phone number is 800-272-3900. They have a 24-hour helpline for people with Alzheimer's disease and their families. There are also local caregiver guides, caregiving tools, Medicare Q&A, all sorts of things on the AARP website, which is very, very helpful. There's also elder law attorneys, www.N as in Nancy, A as in Adam, E as in Edward, L as in Lincoln, A as in Adam.org is a professional association of attorneys specializing in legal services for older adults and people with special needs. There's also the National Alliance for Caregiving. So I'm not going to go through the entire list. There's dozens and dozens of resources. Log on to AARP. Now, if you're not a member and you really want this list, guess what? Reach out to me at firearmmentorcard.com. I'll give you the resource list. Very easy. I will just email it to you. So there's this checklist that AARP has, and it's very similar to when I worked in emergency management, and I'll get to those similarities in a few minutes. There's a goals and needs checklist. We have to figure out what the goals of the person who's affected is: to remain healthy and active, to stay or move near family, to remain in my own home for as long as possible, maintain hobbies, be in community groups, be in religious groups. And then you're going to have to also look at what the strengths are. Is someone able to advocate for themselves? They have adequate finances, low maintenance, single-story home. My in-laws just moved from a single-family home to a condo. They don't have to deal with snow removal. They don't have to deal with lawn care. And they are very, very happy in their new place. Then AARP suggests a general needs assessment. What's the home maintenance and living situation? Who's going to pay the rent and mortgage? Who's responsible for repairs, ongoing maintenance, grocery shopping, meal prep? And now there's services that you can have groceries delivered, which is fantastic. We didn't quite do that during the pandemic, but we would place an order at the grocery store, various grocery stores, and we would go and do curbside pickup. And that way we didn't have to interact with other people. Also, what are the transportation needs? Are there appointments that people need to get to? Now, I ran into recently an old teacher of mine who doesn't drive anymore. And I was at my doctor's office. I was exiting. She was coming in. My mom taught with her, and our families were very close. And she was Aunt Joyce to me. Not biological aunt, but she was my aunt. So I was walking to the car. I passed by these two people. I saw her profile out of the corner of my eye, and I said, wait a minute, that's Aunt Joyce. And I turned around. Now, by the time I turned around and went back in, she had gone in, but I knew her son. I used to play with him. So I said, are you Jeff? And he says, yeah. He had no idea who I was because I hadn't seen him in 30 plus years. And the point is, he is her chauffeur. He is her transportation. She does not drive anymore. So he is the one who has to take her to the appointments or coordinate rides or locate transportation services. Personal care at home is also important. Does the person need help with daily grooming and dressing? Do they need a ride to the hairstylist, the manicure place, the pedicure place? It's very important to make them feel pretty. My mom was the last couple weeks in her life, she was in a nursing home, and my brother-in-law's father was a barber, hairdresser, or whatever you want to call him. I'll never forget his kindness. Here she is, she's in the nursing home. He came with his equipment and he did her hair for her. That was phenomenal. That was a great mitzvah. Actually, I have a tear in my eye right now. But that was a great mitzvah that I will never forget his kindness. And that's how I operate. If you are kind to a family member of mine, oh man, I am loyal to you forever. I never forget the kindness that people showed my parents or the kindness that my children are shown. Then there's a whole thing about healthcare. Typically, somebody will need to go with a patient who has memory care issues because there are cognitive problems. They may not remember, they may not comprehend some of the things that the doctor is telling them. They're going to want a family member to take notes and report back to the family. They also may need some help with submitting medical bills, insurance bills, medication management. Communication is also important. Call your parent every day. My ex-wife made me do that when my mother was alive, and I'm very grateful for that. I've really learned from her. And I would talk to my mom every day, and my mom sometimes can be very, very positive, always had a smile on her face, but she could also be very negative. Socialization is important. We don't want the person with memory issues to be a hermit. We want to get them out, have them play cards, have them walk in the neighborhood, interact with the neighbors, go out to dinner, do normal activities. Just because the memory is affected does not mean their personality is affected, does not mean their desires are affected. It's just they can't remember certain things. And then what are adaptive devices? In the house, for example, I built a 4-inch stair because I have people visiting the house who use a cane and a walker, and the stairs are 8 inches tall, and this made it a little bit easier for them. I also can recommend a gentleman with a company called Rent-A-Son. My in-laws hired him, and he put up grab bars in the bathroom, and he did it. He's a handyman. He did a bunch of other things. His name's Michael Geese. If you need his information, I'm happy to share it. I may have him on a future show as well. One of the great pieces of technology that you can have is the emergency button, the lanyard. The old joke about help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Yeah, it became kind of a viral joke before the internet, but it's a great tool for someone who actually lives alone or will be alone for a certain amount of time. For example, they have one caregiver has to leave, one caregiver is half an hour late. Well, at least they got the emergency button. It's also important to coordinate with the fire department. Fire department should have access to your house. You can have a Knox box outside of your house. A Knox box is a specialized box. It's on commercial facilities. I got one for my ex-father-in-law from his fire department just because I had the relationship. And it's mounted on the outside. And the fire department has a specialized key to access the Knox box, which will open and then provide a key to the home. So if there is an elderly person who falls, then they can gain entry without breaking down doors or windows, etc. When I worked for the Glencoe Public Safety Department, we had a program, and at the time I think 4 or 5 people were part of it. They were living alone, no memory issues, but they were living alone, and they would call in by 10 a.m. every morning. And if they didn't call in, we would send a public safety officer over to their house. I've been on these calls, and the couple calls that I was on, because most people, they live alone, they're lonely, they want to talk to someone. So they'll go and they'll talk to the police dispatcher. And the one that I remembered vividly, the person wasn't home. They went out to breakfast. They forgot to call in. The car wasn't there. They were perfectly fine. It was not a big deal. But that's all part of community policing, which we'll have an episode on in the future. There is also a personal identification checklist. This is where you keep all of your papers together, including social security card, birth certificate, marriage certificate. If the spouse is deceased, a death certificate, divorce papers, military records, on and on and on. I have that list for you. Again, my contact information is at firearmmentor.com. Or, very similar, you can go to the AARP website and look for the checklist. Or you can go to the FEMA website and find the EFFAK. And it lists all of your doctors, your pharmacy names, your doctor name and number, all sorts of contact information. So, say your power goes out, you can't access your phone, at least you have a paper copy. Mine is actually laminated. Having a list of medications is important, and if necessary, having a emergency medical bracelet, medical necklace that maybe lists some conditions would be a good idea. I went to lunch with one of my students recently and his wife, and he had a bracelet on, and it was a medical bracelet. It said blood thinners. I think I still have my mom's. Parental controls may also be important. Now, I know they're for kids, but I mentioned my mom, and when she was going through some memory cognitive issues, she would order a ton of stuff from QVC, and this is pre-internet or at the beginning of the internet. She would order things on QVC. She wasn't internet savvy, and it was kind of early on with the internet, but she would see something, and all of a sudden we'd get boxes. And it's not like today where you get 10 Amazon boxes a day. The main thing is that in a survey, 3 out of 4 adults age 50 and older, they want to stay in their homes. And many do. About 9 in 10 actually live in their home, in someone else's home or a caregiver's home. And some homes are very well suited, like a ranch. Stairs is an issue, but you can get one of those chair lifts. And the goal is, again, I keep repeating this, to help our loved ones be as independent as possible at home for as long as possible. Home modifications might be necessary, and they can be beautiful and stylish. There are all sorts of things. There's a home builder's directory. There's the home fit guide with AARP. It could just mean a no-step entry, basically a ramp for someone with wheelchairs and walkers, or to make it easier to carry medical equipment. First floor bedroom. If you have a multi-floor home and you can reconfigure a den or something to be a bedroom, that will help the person. Or you can actually build an elevator, which is a pain in the rear end. But the chairlift is a good idea. Grab bars, raised toilet seat, also a very good idea. So you got to measure how high your toilet seat is from the ground, and can the person get up and down from them. When we moved into our current house, we had low toilets, very low toilets, and we had them replaced with a higher toilet, made it easier to get up and down, and we don't have mobility issues. It's important to have reachable outlets, controls, knobs, and switches. You don't want someone who's off balance using a walker bending over to plug something in. So waist high, chest high, counter high plugs is a good idea. Don't have one? Guess what? You can have a power strip. So the power strip is plugged in, at knee level, which is where a lot of outlets are in a home. And you can use some double-sided sticking tape and put that on a wall. You can put it on a counter. I have one on the back of my dresser so that I don't have to bend over and move furniture. It's just I screwed it into the back of the dresser. Variable countertop heights are important, as well as easy-to-use handles and doorknobs. Lever handles are easiest for arthritic hands. And increased lighting. Dim areas produce falls. We have a friend of the family, and her mom had a stroke. And I was a little kid, but one of the coolest things she had, at least to me, was a lamp. You would touch the lamp, and it was one of those that have 3 illumination levels. You touch it once, it would turn on. You touch it again, and that's how she turned on the lights. Safety is a top priority. 1 in 4 Americans over the age of 65 fall, and it could be just a simple adjustment. take the wheels off a chair. This didn't have to do with elderly, but my mom's chairs in her kitchen, if they were kind of like a cross at the bottom or a T, 4 arms with wheels, and if it was in the right place, the whole chair would tip over. They stunk. I hated those chairs. You can imagine I fell over more than once. For those who are wanderers, it's very important to install alarms. It's very easy to place. There's floor mats that you can get. When someone steps on a floor mat, ding, put them in front of your door. You put them next to the bed where the person gets out. There's chair seat alarms. There's even simple door alarms you can get at a hardware store where the door opens and it dings. Also, shower safety is important. I talked about grab bars. I didn't mention this, but a shower chair is also important. One important safety tip that sometimes is overlooked is, as adults, some of us are interested in firearms, and we have firearms, we collect firearms. But then when there's a memory care issue, wow, those firearms should not be in the possession of somebody who has memory care issues. And I'll give you an example. My wife's grandmother had dementia. Now, this is way before dementia was as common as it is today. They suspect she had dementia. And she always thought that the dog was a monster, and she would hit the dog with her purse. Get away, get away, get away, you're a monster. She didn't have the cognitive ability to understand that this was actually a pet. It was an animal. So God forbid that she would have a gun and someone come to the door and she misperceives them as a threat and uses the firearm. That's a horrible thing. Also, we don't want self-inflicted issues. Someone with a memory care issue could be going in the garage to clean a gun, and because they have a memory issue, they do not unload it, and then all of a sudden the firearm discharges into themselves, into another person, into property. So we want to make sure that firearms are out of the hands of people who have significant memory care issues. This is similar to why we don't want children to access our guns, because they don't have enough cognitive development to restrain themselves, to understand what's going on. So we just want to keep everybody safe. So that's very high level. Stay tuned, and we will be back with Eric Klein from Care Patrol, who provides no-cost resources to people who have family members with memory issues. He is a fantastic resource. He's coming up next. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.